Hi, and welcome to Discovering Dataflex. This episode, I want to pay a special thanks to Chris Kaniewski, who actually replied on 2 of my videos these last weeks with some thoughts and tips on how I can improve. So this video is going to look at what he wrote and see what we could do with those things. And the first thing we want to look at is the CallStackDump that he mentioned in my last video about the debug log. So I just want to show you, I added this code here, CallStackDump, and I added a string for the stack. And then I move this to the trace and or to our body with the trace here. And we can go back to the folder. We see I have deleted the debug log here. And if we run this and go in here and press our test buttons, the info, warn, or error, we can actually go back here and see that the debug log has been updated. And now we have our trace, so we can actually see where the call was made. This was in the warning button, this was in the info button, and this was in the error button. And that is just so helpful to be able to get the trace of where the code came from and how it's you ended up where you ended up. And if you're confused with all these numbers, which I assume you will be if you haven't worked with Dataflex for a long time, you cannot really go into the code like here and say, okay, what file is it? Is it the line number here is 50? So why does it say 32,000 here? So that doesn't make sense, but it does, because in the app source folder, when you compile the program, it also outputs a PRN file. And if you open the PRN file, let's see, and we go to, for instance, this line 37,277, if you note, it starts at 32,000, and that is because it is not including the internal libraries of Dataflex, but the code you've written is shown here from start to end. So if I now search on this line, you can see that this is the send debug info. This is test info in our web info button. So now you can figure out where in the code this is, and that's a lot easier. So you can actually trace back to where in the code the error occurred when you look at the log. And that is so helpful. Thank you, Chris, for that. And that it also works in the web. So that's really great. Now, about the file structure, when you write to a file, it's correct that you cannot automatically create new folders. So if I go in here to my application again and write like my own weird folder structure, then it will cause an error. It won't work. So what I did was I created a new function. If I can find it here, folder manager, and it takes a path and a command that you can choose if you want to just verify if the folder exists, or if you actually want to create the folder structure. I also added this warning here, because if you let the user decide the path or enable the user to create a path into your file system, that's obviously bad. But you want to use this if you, for instance, have an item that you want to upload an image on or something, or write a file that has an ID, then you can actually create the folder structure internally using this function. So here what we do is we take the path and split it on slash, and if it doesn't slash that way, then slash this way. So I'm just checking if it didn't split anything when I did it this way, then I do it that way, and I make sure that I have the array as I like. I'm not sure. This seems to be the correct way to do it in Windows, and this is the path that you actually get from DataFlex. It uses backslashes, and if you look in the Windows folder structure, it actually uses backslashes. So that is probably the right way to do it. So to be correct, I should probably just go those two lines and just split on this one. Otherwise, it'll not work. And it's just I'm too familiar with using Linux instead, so I'm a bit confused when it says backslash. You see here, I'm creating the path wrong. So what we do, yeah, now we have the folder as an array. So we take the first element, and since it's the first, it doesn't start with the slash. So that's why we're doing it before we go into the loop here. And then while our I depth variable is less than the size of the array -1. And why do I have the -1 here? Well, in my case, in this file, I'm actually writing the name of the file I want to create. So I want this folder and I want this folder, but I do not want this to be a folder that it creates, because this is a file name. And there could be different way. You could check if it is a file name with a proper type, or you could decide that we should not send the file name, only the actual path in here, and then the -1 would have to go. So I haven't decided on which one is the most appropriate right now. We might also put a command up here that indicates if it's going to use if it's a file included in the path or not. So what we do is we test if the file exists, and this checks if folder exists as well. So if the folder exists, then we get a true here, and we don't do anything. We just continue and increment the depth and add another part of the path to our test path. We check that one, and if it doesn't exist, then if we have the C as a parameter, we create the directory by doing make directory as test path. And if it's only a verify we want to use, we just send return false, and that will indicate that the path you're trying to write to does not exist. And then when we're done, we just return true. And I also added this to my write file procedure, and I did that here before we try to create the output. So get folder manager is file path, and here we actually have the file because it's a file path, and create if it does not exist. BOK is just because we have to catch whatever the function returns. If we do not want to have the option of V, we could have made it a procedure as well. but I opted for a function in this case. So let's see if this works now. Now I write, I actually write from the project folder. So I'm gonna just say my new folder backslash my other folder file.txt. There is some text for the file. And we can append. And now we can go in here to our DataFlex demo. We can see that it has created my new folder and my other new folder. And in here we have a file. And if we look at the file, you can see here some text. So now it has properly created the folders and added the file. So we don't have to worry if the folder does not exist, because the system will automatically create the structure for us. I hope this was helpful. And if you like the new format where I already have written the code and only explained how I implemented it, please leave a comment below and say if this was a better way to do it, or if I should continue with writing the code as I'm explaining. And in any way, have a wonderful week and see you next time. Bye-bye.